Right. Hello, I'm Tom from PlayFrame, and this is the third part of my tutorial about how to put a photo scan, like this one, that we created in the last video, and put it as an object into Tilt Brush. And we're going to do that by uploading it to a system called Poly, which I covered in the first video. Now we're going to use a different program in between here to take it from here to an object that we can upload to Poly, and we're going to use a program called Blender to turn it into a workable 3D asset that we can upload to Poly. The first part then is about loading up Blender, which you can get online. It's a completely free piece of software, like everything I'm using today, apart from Tilt Brush. And then you're in Blender, like here, and the first thing to do is we've got to import our model from Meshroom. So within Blender, the first thing that happens whenever you open Blender is you're always given a box and a camera and a light. You don't need any of this for what we're doing, so we need to delete all this to start with. So we press A, which selects everything, and then we press X, or you press delete, and you say, yes, I want to delete it, and we've got a nice clean space here. Now, Blender's quite a complex piece of program, so I'm not going to be able to explain every single thing in here, but it gives you an idea of the process that I go through in the workshops, taking a plasticine model that someone gives me and how I turn it into an object that works on Tilt Brush. But yeah, the next thing I'll do then is import the object. So the version of the object that we've got from Meshroom is an OBJ. It says it's wavefront.obj is the one we want to import, and then I need to find the folder that it's stored in. Now, within Tilt Brush, whenever you create a Tilt Brush, it actually within the space where the photos are, or wherever you choose to save this .mg that I covered in the last video, it actually creates a folder called Meshroom Cache, and this is where you'll find your folders. And within here, every single step that it goes through here across the bottom has a folder full of data and photos and all different types of things. But the only thing we want is the last section, which is texturing, because that's where the actual model is. There's a folder here that's got a very long name, but that's just where it puts the final piece. Now, you can't see it in there because we're just using a different folder thing, but if I just use Explorer now to take us to mouse, and Meshroom Cache, texturing in the folder with the long name, and there we are. And so we've got a lot of data in here. We have loads of PNGs, which are the actual textures, picture folders, picture files that they use to color the images, and then you've got an textured mesh.mtl and a textured mesh obj. So within Blender, if we just go to mouse, I just got to find it because it's in my, there you are, mouse folder, Meshroom Cache, texturing in the folder with the long name, and all I need to do is click on this one, which is the obj. It'll drag in the textures, it will drag in the MTL and all that stuff that we will need at some point, but you just need to do it from here initially. So we import the OBJ. That square means it's loading, and it's just spending some time working out where it all is. And there we are. And you'll see, oh, that's a bit of a weird shape. Well, it's because if we zoom out using the mouse wheel, you'll see that it is the same object, it's just upside down. This is because Meshroom doesn't really know which way is up. It's able to extrapolate the difference between the different parts of the picture, but it doesn't actually know that the ground is the ground and the sky is the sky. So you have to write it the correct way around first. So what I would do first of all is press number 1, which gives me an orthographic side-on view of where the bottom is. I'll press the mouse click to select it. You see it's selected up here, and then I press R to start rotating it round, and then I press R when I'm happy which way it is. So I'll do that, we'll turn it one way, and then I'll press it a second time because it gives me another type of rotation, which is a lot more like a tilt one. That allows me to line it up with that red line. That's what I want to do. I press G to grab it, to move it to the middle. And then I know from side on, it looks like it's right. And then if I press 7, that gives me the top-down view. Now, it can see that the mouse is not quite in the center, so I press G, bring it to the center. And then if I go to 7 and 1, I can see that the mouse is there. Right, now we've got it in the right place. I just need to get rid of the rest of this nonsense that's all around it. Well, first of all, now usually I would go straight from above, but I'm going to have to remove this stuff at the top here just for that to work at all. So first of all, I select the whole mesh, and then I press Tab, and Tab puts me into edit mode. There's also a drop down box here. We were in object mode, but then we want to go into edit mode. Edit mode allows me to actually affect the vertices. Now, if you've got a computer and you're actually trying to follow along, edit mode is a lot more intense on your computer's power, because it's enabling all these polygons to be moved individually as little vertexes. So bearing in mind that this could be quite intense. I'm going to use, especially with something like this big, because it's a quite large thing. What I'm going to do is I need to select this thing called X-ray mode, which means that whenever I use a select tool, like the border select, which I pressed with B, or the circle select I pressed with C, it'll select everything all the way to infinity behind it. So I select those things, and we're going to delete those vertices. So hopefully I'll have a nice clear view from above it now. Yes, so if I go back to 7, which gives me the nice top-down view, I can see that's my object there. I'm going to press the circle to just encompass the object, and I'm going to press the mouse click to select it. Now that means my mouse is selected, but all this other stuff that I don't want is not selected. So what I want to then do is inverse my selection, which means I can press Control I to inverse, or I can actually come up here and I can use select, and I can go invert. Let's just say there, Control I, and that means everything but the mouse is selected. So then I can press X and delete those vertices. Cool. So that's what I call the first trim, which means it's just mainly the thing I want, and maybe a little bit of the ground there as well. But I'll sort that out in good time. I've also got, you'll notice I've got it in an untextured view at the moment, where I can just see the model. If I press this one over here, the viewport shading, I can change the shading to actually, it will actually bring the texture in, hopefully. Should do. Yes, it will do, because it's pausing. There you are. But it's slower to work in that level, so I like to keep it just working on the mesh for the time being, because that's all we're working on right now. Okay, so now I need to simplify this. It's a little bit complex. It's running at, if I look at the bottom here, it's running at nearly half a million triangles. Well, when you're putting something in Tilt Brush is a game engine. You don't want your objects to be that complicated, especially if you're going to be using it on something like the Oculus Quest, which is mobile hardware. So we need to optimize it so it's a less complicated model. But hopefully we're going to keep a lot of the detail there, because the texture will still be from the high quality model. How we do that, first of all, is I'm going to simplify. I'm going to decimate the model, and decimate means literally kind of divide by 10 the amount of triangles that the object has. So I go to, I have the object selected, I go to this little spanner tool, which is a modifier, and I'm going to go to the modifier that says decimate. And decimate, usually I just go for 0.1, which is almost 100 times simpler than it is. So that's taking it from probably 400,000 verts to something like 4,000 verts. And for this situation, I think that's fine. It looks a little bit blocky, but you can still see the same shape is there. And you can see that this is much closer to maybe what you might expect a video game object to actually have. And I can see also it actually makes working on the object a lot easier, because you're dealing with much bigger triangles. So for example, I can already see how I'm going to maybe fix that ear there by making a nice corner. And so that will just make my job when it comes to actually sewing up this object a bit easier. Okay, so I'm going to apply that. That means that's actually applied, because what I'm looking at there was just if I wanted to change it, I could have at that point. But and then I go back into edit mode, and this is what I call the second trim. So this is the point where I go down and I'm going to trim off this ground, and I'm going to make it just the tree stump. So I like to use circle select, and for this one you can select different things. You can select the vertices, which is the bits in between the polygons, the sides, or you can select the edges, which is very useful for something we'll do in a later where we'll be filling some holes. But for this case where I just want to be deleting whole panels, I'm going to use this, which is I think it's called side select, or is it called face select? Yeah, these are all faces. So I want to get rid of all these faces, so I'm going to use circle select, and I'm going to try and just select all the ones up to kind of darker edge. Okay, now I've selected all of those. Now you can do this in steps, but I like to try and select it all at once, and then I press Exit, X, and then I'm going to delete all those faces. Great. Oh, that's interesting there that there's some edge left. This can often be the case. Sometimes I do this trick where what I do is actually select just the main object, and I press Control and plus, and this is what we call incremental selection. So it will keep selecting everything. I keep pressing plus until it selects everything that is all connected to one mesh, and that means again means I've just got this selected, and then if I want to do a Control I to invert select, so I've got those extra bits there, and then I can say delete, and they are edges, so I'm going to say delete edges. I usually do that always a couple of times throughout the process just to make sure that I'm just working with this object. Great, that looks brilliant. So now I would do a repairing kind of trimming section where I'll start looking at the model and seeing bits I want to repair. So the first thing I'll probably do is go around the bottom of this tree trunk, and I'm going to probably try and make a nice, I'm going to grab the odd vertex, press G, and just move it down. This will just hopefully create a relatively straight circular edge around the bottom of the tree trunk, so that I'll be able to fill it. Okay, let's try again. I'm going to click this side, and then I click this side. Yes, and you see there, we have a line all the way around the outside. I can see it's a nice orange circle. Selected all of the edges of that kind of big hole, and then I'm going to press Alt F, but I'll do it on the menu here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm actually going to, I think it's face, yes, I'm going to fill. Alt F, fill it. So that means it places new geometry in that space to fill it up so that it's not going to be a big hole that you'll be able to see from the bottom. It will actually be a flat surface that we can paint later on. I won't be able to easily paint it like an actual cut-off tree stump, but that probably won't be a problem because I think the bottom of it will likely be within the image, within the painting of something within Tilt Brush later on. Okay, let's have a look at the rest of this object then and see if we can find any other bits that need repairing. What's the next step? There's no holes in it, which is brilliant. So we've done the filling, and now we need to do some smoothing. So go back to object mode, and we'll get to see the kind of blocky version of it there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to press object, and there's a word here, not object, sorry, it's, is it in edit mode I need to do it? It is in edit mode. You go to faces, select all, and then you go to shade smooth. So now that's made a nice smoother version of all those objects. And actually that actually helps me see any weird geometry in there. For example, I didn't notice that, but now because the smooth shader has highlighted it to me, I can see any like problems like that. And that's where I go between object mode and edit mode. There you are. I didn't see that either. Straighten that out. Looks nicer. I can see any weird geometry. Could mess around with his feet, but I'm going to leave it. I'm going to actually let the smoothing do the rest. So this is just a shader smooth. This doesn't actually affect any of the geometry. To actually affect the geometry, we need to use a smooth modifier. Now you can use, there is one here, but I quite like this one that we can actually use within the standard mesh window. Now that means they're all selected, and this pin here is the smooth. So if I draw it in one direction, it's going to smooth it in one direction. If I draw it in the other direction, it'll kind of almost make it more noisy in the other direction. So It's quite a delicate balance, this, and to be honest, if you're doing it all at once, it can leave you some weird results. So if you see like the bottom of the tree there, it's gone all spiky when I've actually managed to smooth out the top of the mouse there. What I might decide to do is I'll undo that using the standard Control Z if you ever want to undo anything in most programs. What I might do is I'm going to use border select. I'm going to select everything but the bottom of the tree, because that seems to be the only thing that seems to be messing around. And we can shade again. There you are. A bit more smoother. Sometimes I like to do what I call I do a subdivide, where actually I divide all of the polygons up by one more, so there's almost doubles the amount of polygons, and then smooth it. You should get less geometrical fiddling with it then. But I don't mind it being a bit smaller than the original mesh, so that we can actually fit it within. And actually, if you look at those ears now, they look really good. They don't look like there's chunks missing out of them anymore. And yeah, some of the detail on his arms has gone, but the texture is going to do a lot of that work for us. Cool. That's quite enough of this video for now. Please watch the next and final video as I create and bake a new texture for the mouse, touch up that texture a little bit, and then upload the whole model and texture to Poly. Then finally, you'll be able to see my attempt at making a little tilt brush sketch using the model. Bye for now.